Hello and welcome back. So the hits just keep on coming. I did it again. Bought another guitar. Couldn't stop myself on this one. What we've got here is a 1998 Norman B20 6 string. Here's some shots. So it's obviously got some issues, but it's a Norman B20. How do you say no to it? So as you can probably see by the headstock, the smaller three strings have been wound wrong. The fretboard's a little dirty, and it's been mainly used right along the bottom end. The pickguard has the famous sag because the thing was probably stored upright in the sunshine and the heat has melted the glue and the pickguard has slid down to meet the bridge. And I have no idea what has caused these marks at the bottom. They were just called scrapes. So we've got some work ahead of us. We're going to have to go over it. We're going to give it a good tune up, clean up, set up, restring, and get the strings wound the proper way. This is what I enjoy about this. I'm going to take a guitar that looks like this and make it into a very capable, playable guitar. So, off to the bench. And so, as usual, our first step is going to be check the nut. Putting the capo on the 3rd fret, what we want is just a little bit of gap between the strings and the 1st fret. And you can tell that by tapping on them and getting a the bottom one might be just barely touching, but no, there is a little bit of a gap. So that's what we want, roughly about a business card width. But you can usually tell just by tapping. If you get that piano-y type sound, that's what you want. So our nut is in good shape. Next, we're going to check. And so in millimeters, you could drive a truck through there. It's about 2.75, 2.75, 2.75, 2.75. Oh, that's only down to 2.5, and 2.5 to 2.25. Way high. So then we take a look down the neck, and it is fairly flat. We could maybe do just a slight truss rod adjustment, but we are going to have to shave or sand off the saddle. So, full day ahead of us. Let's get to the next step. So, you always loosen off skinny strings first. It's weird turning that backwards, but it's only a couple of more times till we get the setup right, and then we will remove them all together. I'm guessing we just wired it the way it was supposed to go. This one key seems a little more stiff than the other ones, as well as that one, so we may end up also adjusting the keys. So we will now take a look at what size of a key fits the Godin. This is why I don't tell you what size of key fits the guitar, because this should not be this large, but it is. So, okay, we are wanting to tighten the truss rod. So we will pull it towards us, and it is stiff, but it was pretty much right at the end anyways, so one wind it is, tighten up the strings again, check the action again. So we look down the neck and it's straighter than it was before. Back to checking the action at the 12th in millimeters. We have about 2 1/4, 2 1/4, 2 1/4, 2 1/2, 2 1/4, and about 2. So we are going to want to shave off. We're at 2 1/4. I want 175. So we want to drop 1/2 millimeter. 2 1/4 down to 175. So if we're wanting to drop 1/2 millimeter here, we want to drop a whole millimeter up here because of math. The distance between here and there is 1/2. So if we drop it a whole millimeter here, we're going to get a 1/2 millimeter there. And that's where we want it. Double check. Always double check. 2 1/4, 2 1/4, 2 1/4, a little less, less. So yes, we want to drop this about a whole millimeter, a 1/2 millimeter, from 2 1/4 down to 175. So we're going to shave off a whole millimeter off of the saddle, and that is our next thing to do. Now this particular nut is not compensated at the one end. So I took not a paid promotion, a black marking utensil, and I put a little black stripe on the very end so I know which end is for the smaller strings. So we wanted to keep it was fairly level all the way across, but we're wanting to take down about a whole millimeter. So I'm going to check what a millimeter looks like. And we're probably going to take down 2 millimeters. So what I'm going to do is basically take this marker and put a mark along the nut, along the saddle, so that we know where we want to sand until. I want to take off at least a millimeter. So this is basically a guideline. What we're going to do is probably take so much of it off, and then we're going to put it back in the guitar and double check, because you can always take more off. You can't always put more on. So that is basically just our guide. Now we're going to sand until that is pretty much disappeared, and then we'll put it back in the guitar, bring it up to tension, and see. This is some 180 grade sandpaper. Just going to sand off the bottom. Now, if you have a bad nut, yeah, if let's say your nut has one groove that's just a little too deep, you can save the shavings, make a little concoction out of the shavings and a bit of glue, jam it in your groove and let it harden, and then recut your nut. That's gonna look good, and that's gonna look interesting in the closed caption. But anyways, that's the truth of that. Now, this is also a lot harder to sand off than a lot of the nuts I've had. So my guess is either this has been replaced, or they changed the formula of the tusk between 1998, or maybe because it's a Norman and not a Seagull or an Art and Luthier, which is what I'm used to. This will be my first Norman. So sand until you don't see as much of the line and start again. So I'm collecting my nut dust and saving it for a good occasion. You might have to explain to your mom what's in that little vial of white dust, but we're about halfway there. And now that we've taken about 3/4 of the line off that we put in there, we are going to reinsert this, bring it back up to tension, and check it again, because remember, you can always take more off later. You can't add on. So that's where we go next. And action at the 12th. Got about two and a bit, 175. So we're homing in on it. So we got 175 at the bottom. So now we don't want to go much lower than that. We could if we have to, but from 2 to 175, we're going to probably take off the rest of that line. And if we go down to 1.5 at the bottom, that's not bad because it's a skinny string. Back to sand. So we have about that much line left on the saddle. We're going to remove it. Okay, so we have now sanded the line pretty much off there. There's just a hint on this side and just a hint on that side, a little more at the end of the skinnier strings because that one didn't have to come down so much, so I put more pressure on this one. And remember, save your nut dust. Now when you're doing your setup and you're loosening and tightening the strings all the time, don't get it into perfect tune. All you have to do is get it into rough tune. as long as you're close. 175, 175, 175. A little more than 175, 175, and 150. So the third string is a little bit high. We could probably just put a little groove in the nut to bring it down a little bit, but I'm not going to worry about that just yet. We'll worry about that coming down the road. The most important thing is this is in a good playing height for me. If we need to go a little higher, we can loosen off the truss rod, and that will bring the head out a bit. It'll give you a little bit more room there, and I like it really low because I have carpal tunnel, so that way I don't have to push as hard on the strings. But the most important thing is this is in a good setup now, so I can take these stinking strings off, because my OCD has had a bad time trying to loosen and tighten those three strings backwards. So remove all the strings and start in the cleanup. Yeah, that's what we'll do next. Now if you remember from the pictures how the tails on the headstock were extra long, the person had enough string to do the windings properly, but the tails were so long that there was only about one wind on each of the spindles. Yeah, you want a good 2-3 windings on each of the spindles if you can. If you're the type of person that keeps track of where your nuts are or your bridge pins are, do that now. And make sure that you dispose of the strings properly. Don't cut them down the middle and make two separate string wastes. Keep them all in one run. Wind, roll down to this end, and then through the bottom. This gives you one good coil of gunk. Take them back to the Axe Shack in your neighborhood and tell them that you want them to recycle them, because they should. They don't always, but they should. So now it is cleanup time. Get out your favorite spray cleaner. Not a paid promotion. I'm just using old t-shirt material, cutting all the hems and seams off, as they're made of a nylon thread, and will eventually, like going over your guitar with one of those green scratch pads. Yeah. So gonna take the nut out, or the bridge out. Gonna take the saddle out, leave it aside while we're doing the cleanup. Don't know if I'm going to be able to get this glue off with this cleaner. Might need to go over it with naphtha or something, but I'm not going to worry about it today. I'm just cleaning up to see if this is a guitar I keep or flip. So I'm still waiting to hear back from Godin on the basic composition of the guitar. My guess is that it's got a solid cedar top and wild cherry sides, but the back seems to be that it might be cedar as well. So I'm gonna have to find out from them on that one. But now I'm just noticing that all the tuners were a little bit tense, and that tension can be removed by these small Phillips screws in the end of the paddles. Now they won't lock up your tuning, but they will change the tension with which the tuners twist. That one feels good. This one felt good beforehand. Good. That one's better. That one's better. These two were the worst. And they both feel better. This one can maybe be tightened just a touch. It's a very small amount of movement will do the tension. Basically what it does is there's a little gasket between the paddle and the headstock to the tuner, and that just basically makes a little more tension on them and has a little more resistance. So I am good with that. The other thing is I went at the excess glue where the pick guard had slid, and I seem to have removed most of it. There's a little bit in between the rosette there at the bottom, but with more cleaning it'll happen. It was just excess glue. I don't think I'm gonna bother trying to change it or anything. It's what it is. But I've noticed now that the frets are all rather tarnished. So next thing we're going to do is tape up and polish the frets. The ends don't seem too bad. Maybe a couple of them could use a little bit of filing. Up in here they are bad, but you don't play up in there much anyways. So stand by. But before we get to the tape off part, if you want to check, see if your frets need any work, get a straight edge, go across 3 frets and try and rock. If you can't get any sound, then all is well. You do 3 frets because then if there's a high one, it will show. If you go across 4 frets, null and void. These are all very flat. Once you get up so far, you're gonna have to go to this side. Now there's just barely any rock on that one. Okay, a little bit in the middle. Once you get up into here, unless you get any buzzing, it's not worth doing up in here because you don't play up in there very often. If you get any buzzing, then check them out. But other than that, okay, so there's going to be a couple. Now to tape off the fretboard, what you're going to do is take a strip of tape, put along the side here with the ends just at the bottom of the frets. Do both sides first and then go over the top. That's going to come in real handy when you try and take it off at the end, because then you can just pull the one strip of tape and most of the cross will come with it. You're going to need 2 strips here, here. Once you get up so far, then the tape is too wide. Get yourself thinner tape. I haven't got that, so what I end up doing is cutting down the middle and then just letting the center overlap. Either way, I'm not going to let you watch me tape this all off, so I will put you on pause. So the taping off has basically 2 uses. One is that it protects the fretboard from the file and the polishing wool, but where I was saying, once you get up so far and the frets are wide, or the fret board is thinner than the tape. So I just cut it in 2 like that. Take one side against there, and then the other side will instantly overlap. That's one. And protect the other side. Now I cut that all on an angle, but the two sides of tape still match. So you're gonna make sure that you have a full 100% coverage. And yeah, try to be careful not to cut yourself silly on the knife. For instance, don't know if this one's going to work, but as you can see, one's got a really narrow spot, one's got a really wide spot. That really wide spot lines up with the really narrow spot. 100% coverage. Once you get down in here, you're going to have to be a little more careful about your cutting to try and keep it down the middle, and actually down in here you're going to have to cut the center part off of the tape. But that can all be fixed with getting narrower tape. I've got a lot of this, so this is what I'm going to do. And the second part that the tape does, other than protecting the fretboard and the neck, is hopefully any of the adhesives in there is going to pull dirt off of here. So, two stones with the same bird. So now we go looking for those frets that had the rock in it. And we're going to start with this one. So we take out our file. This file has a little groove down the center there. What you want to do, there's not much that needs to be taken off this. And remember, the fret is curved this way with the radius. So just take a couple of swipes and check it again. For instance. Okay, so we've got this end. We just got to do the center and that end. See, that is good. Now we can probably do just a little bit up at this end again. You don't want to go too much with this. You can have like a complete free fretting. A luthier will like flatten them out and make them perfect. My idea for this channel was to show you that you can do your basic maintenance yourself and save the really big jobs for the luthiers, because the luthier hates taping off this stuff. My guess. Maybe they have a better way of doing it. Now I'm not seeing any real dents in the frets. And once we get up into this area, you don't do a lot of playing up in there on an acoustic, so okay. You can hear the ticky there. thing about this file is it's also curved, so it will not flatten out the top of your fret. There's a little bit on this one. Now I don't go after the ones that are just very minor. You can guess yourself which ones are going to do that. So one more stripe should do it. Ah, two. Be careful. Don't go too far. Go too far and you're going to end up having to do one of the other ones. There. So, we're good. Now, as I say, we did like what we saw there, but I'm going to show you how to do the ends as well. If you've got a sharp edge here, the fret is shaped this way up to the end, they cut it on an angle like that, so there's just a little bit of a sharp edge just on the top. You don't want to file too much of it off, but you're just getting that very edge. Now I roll as I'm going away from myself. And these ones are usually a little bad, but they're up out of the way of where you usually play, so you want to be careful not to poke the end of the file into the face of the guitar. And then I will turn it around and go the other side. And here's why you want to tape that off. All metal shards. You don't want that near your guitar. And now the reason for the tape. Now, because there's still shards on the board here, we're going to get a damp paper towel and just dab everywhere to try and pick up the rest of those metal shards. So now the next order of business is fretboard oil. Not a paid promotion. I guess you knew that though. Okay, we are going to do the bridge as well because this bridge looks rather dry. I don't think it's ever been done. So we're going to get ourselves a nice liberal amount. To seep in. And do the complete fretboard, 100% coverage top to bottom. It's going to take a little bit till the fretboard oil comes out of the dispenser thick enough. There we go. We're going to get a nice good coating on here and then let it sit on there for a count of 432 because that's how long we want it to seep into the fretboard for. And then we will remove all the excess. My guess is from the looks of this particular guitar, it was not really fretboard oiled, so we'll see how it turns out. Now the fretboard on this particular guitar, the Rosewood, seems to have a very heavy grain. There are some large grain spots on it. So I think it's going to seep in pretty good. I've done the bridge and took a rag and did the edges because that's something you don't always get. Now, these scratches, I had a similar type problem with an old Art and Luthier that I have, and I'm going to go over it with the fretboard oil, and it should deaden it. If there's open pores, if it really is scratched off, then the oil should seep in to the abrasions. I'm not sure what this is that did this. So I'm going to go over the whole faceboard with the fretboard oil. People, nobody's told me not to do this. So we're going to see just how much this works. getting, of course, a liberal amount down at this end where the issue is, but I'm just going to give the rest of it a nice light coating. Just like the fretboard, I'm going to try and let this seep in. Let's see what it does. Ooh, it's starting to pool on there. That's good. Perfect. And even it out. I'm going around that area over there because I want the oil to pool into the grain if possible. I'm not going to do the sides or the back, just the top. Still going to have a satin type finish to it, but just a little more royal, let's say, for lack of a better word. Now you can see some marks down in here where a pick's head touched it. And let's I do have some satin urethane that might help that too, but I don't know if I can just do that in one spot or if it would need to do the whole thing and then it would just look the same, only different. I guess we'll find out. So put a little more on here in the spots that need it the most. And while it soaks in, we're going to wipe off the fretboard. As I say, we're taking it off the fretboard because we don't want the oils to get between the fretboard and the neck. We don't want the oils to get down in the gaps under the frets because that will only loosen everything up, and we don't want that. So this rag is fairly well oil soaked. Let's get a fresh my oil rags are red. That's where my oil rags are red. That's where my cleaner rags are beige, so that you can keep them identified against each other. Like to go over the neck with the cleaner afterwards in case you got any of the oil on there. think we're ready to restring, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters. Let's do that. And so just before we restring, we're going to grab our 10 mil deep socket and tighten up all the headstock nuts. Pretty much all of them were just a little bit loose. So I'm going to make sure they're tight. I use a deep 10 mil because the spindles will push off a ratchet or whatever if you try to do it with the ratchet. And once you get a deep one, you can usually grab it by hand and hold it fairly tight. But I'm going to make sure these are tight. And you want to do that before you put the strings on. They were all loose. I'm not wrenching them too hard. That's why I'm holding it right by the top of the ratchet instead of down the handle. I'm just making sure that they're snug enough that they will not come loose. Voila, string time. Because I'm going to be keeping this guitar for at least a while, I'm going to use the strings that I like. These are not a paid promotion. Roto Sound, Jumbo King, medium lights, 12, 16, 24, 32, 44, and 54 British strings. Because, well, I'm Canadian, so we're going to take the pins. There is a small circular round spool on the end. You want the roller to roll down into the hole, not sideways, this way, not this way. So we're going to take that, put that down in, push the peg down in. Once you get so far, the peg will keep going and the string will not. See, this one is not doing that because it wasn't perfectly straight. It won't roll off the end of the pin. You want to go down so far, and then the pin should keep going and the string should stop. And it's not happening because that roller is turning once I get it down in there. There we go. You want the string to stop going down, but the pin to keep going down. And always remember to put the saddle back in. Ask me how I know. Okay, that goes up. We're wanting to go into the first spindle, so we go up past the second spindle, leave yourself about 2 extra inches or so, and cut. Holding on to the tail so it does not shoot across the room. Then we put the tail through the spindle just so the end sticks out just about the width of the string itself and crank it. Now we're going to wind it around, and we want to go over top of the tail the first time it goes by, and then we want to go under the crank when it comes around, under the tail when it comes around, and keep rolling down into the headstock. This will give you a nice brake action at the nut. Aha! And the pin has come out. Make sure the pin stays down. Do it 5 more times. The only other thing you gotta know about stringing the guitar is when you've got 3 on either side, the string always goes this way on this side and that way on this side. You want the string to go onto the spindle from the inside of the head. I know, but this one didn't have it that way. So away we go. Now it's tune-up time. Of course, you're going to end up putting in tune, reefing on the strings, and tuning it again. Do that about 5 or 6 times, and then keep doing it until finally the strings don't stretch anymore. The strings have to get tightly wound around these spindles, and they will stretch a bit. So tune, reef, tune, bend, tune, da-da-da, over and over and over until it's done. My guess is usually about 7 or 8 times you have to tune this thing to get it to stay in tune. So that's where you go next. She's going to be beautiful. But first, go wash your hands and get all the oils off. And so with that, thank you for watching. Please share, like, blah, 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 blah. And so with that, thank you for watching. Please. And so with that, thank you for watching. Please share, like, subscribe, leave a comment below. Tell me what I did right, did wrong. I know I do things wrong. I'm not a luthier. I'm just no guy with too much time on my hands. With that, catch you next time. Bye now.